What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, Nick, and I don't say this often, but I was actually more impressed and entertained with Bellator's card this past weekend than the UFC's. Certainly that main event.
Yeah.
Vadim Nemkov is an absolute animal at light heavyweight, defeating Julius Anglickas, who came in as a backup last minute to replace Rumble Johnson. Anglickas landed a good shot early that put Nemkov on his butt for a second, but truly that was about it. He had his 2 seconds in the fight, and it was all Nemkov after that. And he's going to be facing Corey Anderson, who defeated Ryan Bader in less than a minute. This is going to be a great end to the light heavyweight Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I really do love when the UFC and Bellator don't line up on the same nights or the same time. And usually Bellator reserves Friday night, UFC reserves Saturday, so it fills our weekends fully. But when the Bellator has a huge card, or they have one of these Grand Prix and the semifinals and all that stuff, all these people are meeting up. They can tend to move to Saturday and make it a bigger event. Do really good with live audience and all that. And, you don't ever hear Dana White mention Bellator. You don't really ever hear anybody say anything. They don't ever punch down, right? But the UFC's the biggest. You'll hear maybe Scott Coker and some of the analysts talk about UFC fighters, but you won't hear UFC analysts talk about Bellator fighters. That's kind of how it goes. But it is kind of nice to see like a respect between the two organizations. Like, we'll put our card on early. You guys do your thing late. I know you guys have a stacked card, and this one's a little bit light for us. So Bellator, go do your thing. I thought it was a great night of fights. The prelims, I don't know if anybody watched them. I did. Tons of submissions.
Yeah.
Tons of really cool fights. A lot of people with 1-0 records, 2-0, maybe 3-0. Really young fighters, and maybe young in their career is the best way to put it, that put on really good shows and showed a high level of talent. So I think Bellator is pulling some really good athletes and fighters really early and trying to groom them as purely Bellator fighters. Something really cool to see. But when you talk about that, the top of the top, the heap, the best fighters that Bellator has, Nemkov is absolutely one of them. I think that AJ McKee, Patrice Pitbull, and Nemkov are the three most dominant fighters in Bellator. And after that performance, I mean, aside from getting cracked once, it was pretty much flawless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. Nemkov could hang with anybody in the world. But just to your point that you made a few minutes ago, and I think it's worth noting that it really is cool that people are making their debuts in Bellator. People are making their pro debut in Bellator, or they're having their second or third or fourth fight in Bellator. And granted, it's on YouTube. It's on the prelims. There's a few thousand people watching it. But you know what? That's a lot cooler, in my opinion, than fighting in like a local promotion or some small sort of backyard thrown together event organization.
It's in the parking lot of a bar.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're fighting in the Bellator cage. You're walking down that ramp.
Mike Beltran's, reffing your show, and you got Michael C. Williams calling your name out.
It's cool. There's something to be said for that, and I like that. I like that Bellator does that. Obviously, the UFC has such depth that it would be kind of hard for them to let 1-0, 2-0 guys, or even debut guys come in even on the undercard or even on the early prelims. But that is something that Bellator does, because their depth is not as big as the UFC, that I actually can get behind and appreciate. And I love to see. And we've actually known a few people that have gone on and had like their second or third fights in Bellator. And it really helped with their social media following. A lot of these young fighters are, they barely make it. They make enough to pay their gym dues. They teach a few privates here on the side, and after traveling and paying their coaches and all that, they're coming out of some of these fights with a few $100. You know what I mean? There's no riches and fame in this sport until you reach the top of the top. So the fact that some of these people are making their early careers happen in Bellator, and Bellator is signing them and grooming them and developing them as Bellator fighters, I think it's really cool. But, getting into the top heavy part of the card, Vadim Nemkov, in my opinion, could hang with any of the best light heavyweights in the world, and that includes the UFC. Yeah. And before you guys rag me in the comments and say that Jan Blachowicz would have knocked him out with that shot, I agree. However, I think that any given night, Vadim, that shot that Anglickas landed on Nemkov in the first round, you get cracked with the Polish power by that, you're likely going to sleep. Right. But that being said, Nemkov is not even 30 years old yet. He's only got, I think he became 15-2 in pro MMA last night. He's got some Sambo fights, got some things like that under his belt. But this guy is going to develop, I believe, into one of the best fighters in the world, regardless of organization. His ground and pound, his top pressure, even his craftiness when he got hurt, what he was able to do to feint, change levels, throw some fakes, and really well time a takedown that allowed him the time to recover from the knockdown, is showing veteran level ring IQ, even though he's a young guy.
Yeah, I was really impressed. And, Anglickas deserves a ton of credit. His stock went up, I believe, with Bellator.
Tough guy.
And he taking that fight on 10 days' notice against one of the toughest guys in the entire world is something that should be praised. He has a Muay Thai and a kickboxing background. And I was impressed by Nemkov because he was standing and way outstriking him. And I know MMA is a little bit different, but for the most part, when you're throwing kicks and punches, it's kind of a wash. It's all sort of similar. And at one point in the first round, he was over 40 punches ahead and 40 significant strikes, I should say, ahead of Anglickas. And I was like, oh, God, this isn't good. If this guy's a Muay Thai specialist, I can't wait to see how bad it's going to get when Nemkov takes him to the ground. Sure enough, he did. And, man, that ground and pound is disgusting.
Yeah.
He has some of the best ground and pound I've seen in a long time, and it's vicious, and he lands hard elbows, and the top pressure is there. He doesn't stall when he's down there. He doesn't throw weak shots just enough to keep the ref away. He throws things that make you a little bit uncomfortable and uneasy watching a human take those shots.
Yeah.
And so I think Nemkov is a problem. I don't think anybody's touching that belt anytime soon. He'll likely be the guy that jumps up to heavyweight and probably deals with the guys up there as well. I just think that he's too athletic. He's powerful enough to hang with all those guys, and his speed is going to translate really well at heavyweight if he decides to go up there. But I was really blown away. Corey Anderson is the only other guy that might throw a wrench into Nemkov's plans for any time in the future.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right. Nemkov could hold that belt for a very long period of time. However, I think that his next fight is going to be the toughest one that he has for quite some time. Yeah. Suffice it to say, he's not going to hold Corey Anderson down and ground and pound him for 5 rounds. Yeah. Corey Anderson he looks about as good as light heavyweight gets right now. He felt like he never got his shine in the UFC. He never got his due. He never got his title shots that he felt like he deserved. And he kind of came over to Bellator with a chip on his shoulder, and he's been kicking ass ever since. Yeah. I mean, Ryan Bader was the Bellator champ. I think still to this day, the best move from the UFC to Bellator in UFC and Bellator moves history was Ryan Bader coming over. He came over as a guy who was kind of continually in the top 5 and became a champ in Bellator and became one of the faces of the organization. Corey Anderson dealt with him last night. Yeah. And that, you talk about Nemkov's ground and pound being good. Corey's was so good we didn't even get to see much of it.
Because a minute or less of the entire fight.
I'm telling you, and the way he followed up with his hips, like Bader was doing everything, shrimping and bridging and pushing and trying to create space. And Corey was just following him like an anaconda, just like, roping its prey and making it worse and worse with every move, and then just dropping bombs on Bader. I'm very impressed with Corey Anderson's performances since he's been in Bellator. And, man, I think it's 50-50 between him and Nemkov. I think if Nemkov gets past Anderson, you got a champion for several years. Yeah. But I think that Corey Anderson is a very tough opponent for Nemkov. It's going to show what he's truly made of. And stylistically, it's not the ideal matchup for him because Corey's a bit longer, a bit taller, a bit more experienced. And Nemkov isn't going to be able to hit that switch if he gets rocked with a shot and immediately just change levels, get the ground and pound, recover, because Corey's not the guy for that.
Right, and Corey did come over from the UFC with a chip on his shoulder. The Bellator team rolled out the red carpet for him. They treat him like a king. They sit him next to Scott Coker after his fight. They give him a nice big, soda or beer, whatever he likes, and they let him relax. They treat him really well over there. But that chip on his shoulder still hasn't gone away. He still has a point to prove. He still wants to get a belt. So I think he's going to bring it to Nemkov. I think that the two right guys are fighting for that title next, and we got to wait a few months for it. But my hope, and I think Bellator's hope between those two, is that they have a very competitive fight, and we wind up seeing an epic trilogy between those two guys that kind of, solidifies the Bellator light heavyweight division as a dominant force in mixed martial arts and shows the people just how special both of these guys are. They both deserve a ton of praise. And I think that since they're so far ahead of the rest of the pack, it kind of makes sense to just let them sort it out. Now, if Nemkov finishes him in one round, then maybe we bit off too much.
You got Rumble coming back.
Right,
There's
Rumble
other things,
or, Yoel Romero might win. But if Anderson wins, then Nemkov probably deserves a rematch, an instant title shot. And if it's a competitive fight, then let's just run it back again and again. And I think that could actually help Bellator's legacy and growth as a promotion. Because when you have, a legitimate awesome, like we just saw the trilogy between Bronze Bomber, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury. That was epic. People really were waiting at the edge of their seats for the 6 and 8 and 12 months that we had to wait in between those fights. And it just kind of made a statement. So I think the Bellator would love to see that happen. I'd love to see a competitive fight. I think it will be competitive. Early predictions. I think Nemkov will probably get it done. But, man, Corey has a point to prove, and I think he's gonna finally be at ease when he has a strap around his waist.
Yeah, and he seems like he's not stopping until he does. I mean, the guy was doing push-ups on the top of the cage after he won last night. I mean, he still had energy after all that adrenaline dump. Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. The trilogies tend to make organizations a lot of time. You think about the great trilogies in the UFC's history, the rematches. You have George St. Pierre and some of the great wars he was in. They lost to Matt Serra, beat him, and then same thing with BJ Penn. And then most recently, Stipe versus DC, the great trilogy that was there, as you mentioned in boxing. Deontay versus Fury that just happened.
A star was born in Dustin Poirier with the McGregor trilogy.
Exactly. I didn't even think about that one. It's like a really good trilogy can help to build an organization. And I think that these two have the make. I don't think this is going to be an easy fight for either one of them.
Yeah.
Both of these guys are very hard to get out of there, and both of them are game, and both of them have something to prove. Similar skill sets in a lot of ways. And so I think it's going to make for a clash that's really, really good. Yeah. And I can't wait to see what happens. And not to continue drawing comparisons to the UFC, but I almost wish this tournament just went one step further, that Glover and Jan, whoever wins that, fights the winner of Corey Anderson versus Nemkov. Yeah. You can't say that wouldn't be competitive. I mean, I think that the winner of Corey Anderson versus Vadim Nemkov has a legitimate case that they're the best light heavyweight in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if I told you just forget organizations, that Glover Teixeira's next fight was against a guy named Vadim Nemkov, I think a lot of people would go, oh, God, this young Russian guy might beat up one of my favorite all-time fighters. But, he's fighting in a title fight in the best organization in the world. Nemkov is holding a belt in Bellator. So Bellator doesn't have the depth. Everybody knows that. That's clear. And they would even admit that. But as far as the top of the heap, the number 1 and number 2 guys in each division, they're absolutely competitive with the number 1 and number 2, top 5 guys in the UFC.
Yeah, no doubt about it. AJ McKee can hang with anybody in the UFC, in my opinion. And I think we got to add Vadim Nemkov to that. And Corey Anderson's the perfect measuring stick, because Corey Anderson was the guy that was saying, hey, look, I am right here. I need to be given a title shot. I'm the best at light heavyweight. And if Nemkov can go do work on Anderson, I think that nobody will be able to argue anymore that Bellator has one of the, if not the best light heavyweights in the world.
Absolutely. Wish we could actually test that theory and see these guys score off promotion versus promotion, but we'll just have to speculate for fun until then.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Let us know in the comments, did you watch the semifinals of the Bellator Grand Prix? If so, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Corey Anderson and Vadim Nemkov's win. And let us know who you think wins the final fight between those two. Guys, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel is always much appreciated. And give us a like on this video and a listen on audio where you listen to podcasts. Until the next one, guys, have a wonderful day.
Peace.